All right. It's been a while since I've gone into any of the particulars of it beyond the kind of messages that I just said. But let's take a look. There's a guy, Anthony Leonardi, who is part of Long COVID Twitter. He has a separate blog over at EasyChair. The headline of this one, which is just from a couple weeks ago, is called The Intrinsic Severity of SARS Coronavirus 2. It's all about immunomodulation. Okay, what is that? Let's learn. One of the most serious errors in the assessment of SARS coronavirus 2 came down to misappraisals of how it causes illness. We have seen the model of harm to tissue move from cytopathic effect, cyto means cell, path means disease, to immune-mediated bystander damage. So, in other words, this is a novel virus. It's never existed before, so we collectively have only been studying it for a few years. So originally, the model of harm, to like how it damages tissue, moved from a cytopathic effect type of model, thought that it was just, causing harm in the cells, to immune-mediated bystander damage. What does this mean? So inflammation is one thing. We've talked about this many times previously in the COVID update videos, where the spike protein can directly activate inflammatory processes, and a certain amount of inflammation is a normal part of your immune response. It can, cause swelling that gets things in motion in your body and so on. But too much reckless inflammation causes aging and damage. So if you have like rampant inflammation, this is really harmful. And this is one of the ways that SARS-2 does its dirt in your body. So, for example, a few publications have shown it is T-cell, and your T-cells are like a major part of your immune system, mediated, or sort of, it acts through that inflammation, causing anosmia, the lack of smell, rather than the virus directly causing lack of smell. Interesting. So in other words, the virus is causing people to have reduced or completely lost sense of smell. And before you start downplaying that, you think of eating food, for example. Most of your sense of taste, try eating things with your nose held shut. Most of your sense of taste, or what you think of as your sense of taste, is actually your sense of smell. Taste is real. You have receptors on your tongue for molecules that cause a bitter taste, or, sour taste, sweet. So taste is real, but a lot of the phenomenon of what we identify as taste is actually smell. If you lose that, for example, food can taste like rotten garbage, as some people were describing, the way that their sense of smell was malfunctioning as part of their long COVID experience, where food became disgusting to them to eat. Another issue, you're unable to tell whether food has spoiled or not. So if you have leftovers in the fridge, you're not sure. You could be eating harmful things without realizing that they taste bad, like you should spit them out. And so you need your sense of smell, both to keep up your appetite and your ability to eat food, and to identify, things that you should or shouldn't be eating. You probably take this for granted. It's largely unconscious behavior, but this is a serious thing. Having all food taste like literal shit for 2 years, as has been the case for some people, I'd call that a major quality of life issue, because you have to eat multiple times a day just to fuel and rebuild your body. Anyway, so what they're saying is that rather than the virus actually directly damaging the neurons or nerve cells that are involved in this process of smelling, it's actually T-cell mediated inflammation that causes it. Okay, so let's continue. Another publication regarding mice shows that mice without T or B cells actually have no tissue damage. So your T cells and B cells are major pillars of your immune system. And the mice that were lacking them did not have tissue damage. So it seems to be that the virus is actually causing such immune dysfunction that it's causing the immune system to do the damage. Continuing, this was congruent or in agreement with an earlier paper that found a cancer patient with no T cells and chronic infection had no symptoms or signs on X-ray, but was producing high amounts of virus for a protracted time, at least 30 days. So they had a raging infection for like a month. But they didn't have any symptoms. Why? Because they had no immune system. So, I mean, they were dying from the cancer and their immune system was like completely shot. So, I mean, it's not like this is, I know the solution to SARS. Let's just take away our immune systems. No. You need your immune system. This is also why people call it airborne AIDS, by the way. It completely fucks your immune system. But, yeah, so it's the people without immune systems that are not getting the harm. That's kind of scary. It seems that my opinion, as published in 2020, that T cells were causing the harm seen in COVID infections was correct. The mainstream academic community has maintained that there is nothing unique about SARS coronavirus 2 in relation to the common cold coronavirus. Just the flu. No, it isn't. The most recent edict of its non-remarkability came here. First, so here's an example of somebody saying this. Firstly, when, I don't know if I can pronounce this, Petsupan, try that, published his paper in 2022, he compared the changes to the immune system that occurred after SARS coronavirus 2 infection with the changes to the immune system from other common viral infections. So you compare a SARS-2 infection with other common viruses, what happens? He clearly states the changes following SARS coronavirus 2 were unique. Therefore, there is a unique immunomodulation. Modulation means change, so change to your immune system. Quoting, MC groups decreased to levels observed in the human coronavirus and UHC groups. No difference was observed within the LC and MC groups at months, so is this long COVID? Anyway, I wish he had pointed out what these abbreviations were. I guess it's obvious to him. At months 3, 4, or 8, but both groups had higher activity compared to the HCOV group, suggesting that this parameter is specific to SARS coronavirus 2 infection. It is not a common feature of other coronaviruses, unquote. Now, some argue that this immunomodulation and harm is a function of the virus's novelty, like it's just new to us rather than being anything intrinsic to the way that the virus affects us, whether it would be new or not. Namely, Professor Ralph Baric delivered this hypothesis, not as a hypothesis, unfortunately, but just as a statement, in a lecture at the beginning of the pandemic. What am I on for? Some pundits, journalists, and bean counters are unfortunately only as informed or correct as the people they speak to. Shortly after Baric's hypothesis was presented as fact, people argued that novelty was the cause of severity, and so the end of the pandemic was nigh. In other words, as soon as the virus would not be a new thing to our bodies, then it would stop being severe, and then the pandemic would be over. This piece left no room for hypothesis, or testability, or for the possibility that there was an intrinsic component of the virus that could create severe illness. By, in other words, messing with our immune systems on a long-term basis. Rather, it was just the novelty, which implied in that is a short-term effect, that caused the severe illness. Such a proclamation left no chance for reinfections to be severe in any form, and thus the pandemic, would soon be over. Now, there are historical examples of why this is not the case with many viruses. Dengue can cause more severe disease on reinfection. Ebola also can reinfect and is lethal when it does. Both of these viruses have an important commonality. It is their immunomodulation, which creates the severe disease. T cells are killed en masse in Ebola virus infection, yet the virus itself does not infect them. The power is in immunomodulation. It basically tricks your body into doing it. A new piece of information enters the fray. SARS coronavirus 2 forms immunomodulatory complexes which cause overreaction and harm. There's a link to a study on that. And when the T cells die in Ebola, they dump inflammation-causing interferons as a departing gift. So kind of the death throes of the T cell in Ebola is it puts out all these interferons as it dies, and then that causes inflammation. Here, we have an intrinsic piece of the virus that absolutely is not going away with reinfection. So whether it's totally new to you or not, it's not going away. The only thing that could change would be the host susceptibility or the code in the virus itself. But it's not just a time factor. The issue of an intrinsic factor creating severity persists as much as the inflammation persists when viewed via modified PET several years following infection. So it seems that each infection with SARS coronavirus 2 is unlike that of a common cold coronavirus. I hope you, dear reader, are not among those who thought it was. Take care, AJ. Recommend following Leonardi if you are not already. And actually, I have a link to one of the studies that he's talking about here. Viral afterlife. SARS coronavirus 2 is a reservoir of immunomimetic peptides that reassemble into pro-inflammatory supramolecular complexes. So, in other words, they're saying that the virus can act as a reservoir of immune-mimicking peptides that reassemble into these big molecular complexes that cause inflammation. All right? So, inflammation, this has been key. People trying to understand where long COVID comes from. Again, we've only been studying it for a few years, but the inflammation seems key. It seems to be able to create autoimmunity, where you get allergic to your own tissue, basically, and you have an immune response to your own tissue. So yeah, a little bit more detail than we usually get into. I'll call it there for today.